You stand at the edge of a winter, older than clocks. Snow moves in slow, deliberate silence, as if the world has decided to breathe only once every few minutes. Ahead, a cottage crouches under a thatch of white, its roof slumped like tired shoulders. The door is not really a door at all. Two warped planks tied with rope swollen by damp and obedience. A faint orange pulse leaks through the cracks, something between a promise and a warning. Your breath rises in a pale cloud. It looks like a moth that's lost faith in lanterns. The cold is not sharp yet. It is thorough. It sifts into your shoes, fills the seams of your clothing, climbs your wrists. You lift a hand to the latch, a loop of rope that has grown hairy with frost and pores. On the far side of this wood, people sleep or pretend to. Animals drowse. Fire remembers who it is. Everything that matters tonight fits into a single room the size of a modern memory. You pull the rope. The planks resist, then yield with a furry groan. The door opens a hand's width, and winter tries to come with you, but a wedge of straw at the threshold pushes back and you step through. Inside, the first thing you meet is smell, damp, wool, and hearth. Smoke a bright sourness of old sweat, a sweetness you cannot name. Hay and something animal, not unpleasant, only alive. The second thing is weight. The room presses inward. The ceiling is low enough to touch the air, thick enough to hold. The light is not steady. It shivers on the hearthstones and withdraws like a small creature making up its mind. Your eyes need time to learn this colour. It is orange tempered by brown, a shade that exists only where smoke admires flame. Shapes emerge. A bench that has become a table, a chest that is also a bed. Hooks hammered into a beam from which hang herbs, shadows with perfume. There's a wooden bowl, a spoon crusted with a ring of dried oats, a linen bundle the size of a cat that is not a cat. You close the door with the gentleness of someone laying a hand on a sleeping child. The rope settles, the draft thins. Now the winter is outside again mostly. Cold still snakes through the edges and the floor. It has a way of finding what is not its own and trying it on. You stamp your boots lightly to shake off snow and feel the packed earth underfoot uneven and honest. Where people have spilled ale, the ground has remembered. Where animals have slept, it is softer. The floor holds a map of necessity. You move toward the fire. It is not a proud fire. It is a problem solved again for the 100th time. The logs are more ember than wood, and the heart of the glow is the size of 2 clasped hands. Still the warmth arrives. It climbs your fingers, finds your knuckles, eases the ache as if your bones have been apologized to. The smoke does not run upward like a river. It gathers under the roof, swirls, then rises slowly through some version of a chimney, a hole, a vent, a faith that heat learns to escape. You cough once softly, and the room forgives you. Around the hearth lie the sleeping ones. You count by rises and falls, 1 child, perhaps 2, under a patchwork of wool and sackcloth. A broad back turned toward the fire, a narrow shoulder tucked into that warmth. Someone older breath catching in small steps, each exhale a thread of sound you could mend clothing with. A hen on a rail closes one eye and opens the other. The cow is only a shadow wider than the wall, but now and then she exhales and the air plumes from her muzzle like a sacrament. No one asks who you are. This is not that kind of night. In houses like this, identity is heat and usefulness. You kneel and extend your hands to the embers. Then you do the next right thing. You turn a log. You gather the little twigs. Someone saved under the bench for such dawnless hours. You place them like bridges where the red still speaks. You lean close and breathe. Not a blow, a patient encouragement. The ember thinks about it, then grows. Flame arrives like a shy guest who was waiting at the threshold to be named. The ceiling darkens to accept the gift. smoke threads the rafters and paints the bundles of herbs with a gloss. You see rosemary, perhaps, and something bitter wormwood or thyme, the poor household's cathedral incense. The herbs are more than scent. They are a calendar you can touch, a reminder of fields that were green once of a summer that promised it would be back if you kept your side of the bargain. The walls are wattle and daub, a lattice of sticks plastered with mud and straw. Your palm finds the texture grit that remembers fingers. In some places, the frost has lifted the surface in tiny blisters. In others, the heat has smoothed it with soot. Someone has stuffed moss into a crack to stay the whisper of wind, and the moss has frozen in a rictus of heroism. The small window is a square of oiled linen, stretched taut in a wooden frame. The moon presses through it in a diluted square, and the frost has drawn feathers, their ice, that invented birds. You sit on the bench. It finds your weight the way a friend might without ceremony. The room recalibrates to include you. Sounds return one by one. The soft tick of shrinking wood. The minuscule avalanche of ash sliding inward as a coal collapses. A mouse muttering under the straw, or perhaps the straw itself remembering the field where it once made a noise called wind. A child speaks, without waking a syllable, from a dream that has no translation, and a nearby hand answers with a careful tug of blanket. You look at the door again and think about distance. Somewhere outside this cottage, a road exists, and beyond that, a village, and beyond that, the long talk of kingdoms. But all that is a rumour tonight. The centre of the world is here, and smaller than the reach of your arms. The fire is not a metaphor, it is an organ. It beats slowly in orange, and the room's body takes its cue. You notice the cleverness too. A plank near the door set upright, stuffed behind it with straw to confuse the draught that keeps returning like a superstition. A lid turned into a plate. A rope looped across the rafters to dry clothes with the heat of human breath. On a peg hangs a small sack. You know by its geometry as salt. A pinch at a time. Borrowed from days of better luck. Beside the hearth is a clay pot half full of moss and shavings tomorrow's morning saved. You find the household's metal, a hook and a poker, an iron that has survived more winters than some villages. It is black with story. You use it to rake the embers into a smaller city and roof them with 2 twigs, and you watch streets form channels where air can walk. The flame agrees to live a while longer. The cow shifts. The movement moves everyone. Not far, a baby cries that has not yet learned to distinguish hunger from cold. The mother makes the sound that mothers make in all centuries, a hushed vowel that wraps the air and draws the child close. You look away not from embarrassment, but from respect, which here is the same thing. In this house, love is not a spectacle. It is the way a hand finds a shoulder in the dark and becomes a blanket. You rinse your throat with the thought of water. The bucket by the hearth wears a lid of ice, thinner than an eggshell. Someone has cracked it once and placed the shard aside, a broken star leaning against wood. You lift the ladle and sip. It tastes of the room smoke and iron and the truth of cold, and it is good because it is not nothing. Outside the wind tests the thatch. The sound is a low animal at the eaves, deciding whether to enter. It finds a gap and pushes a thin blade through. The blade reaches you like a memory of doubt. You answer with another twig to the fire, and the blade dulls. This is what the night is, not a battle to be won, but a conversation with a hard teacher. The fire says yes, the wind says also yes, and between them you make a kind of treaty called mourning. You sit a little straighter now, the ache in your shoulders, loosening as the heat climbs your arms. The room is not warmer, not really, but you have become better at believing. Your ears begin to sort the night's grammar. Far off, There is a dog that is either a friend or a problem. Closer snow shrugs off the roof. The sound is a small punctuation you can feel through the bench. When the owl speaks a vowel carved out of bone, you hear the field answer with a silence that is not empty. It would be easy to speak of misery here, but the room does not call itself miserable. It calls itself exact. It gives what it has and expects the same. The people inside it do likewise. You have seen houses that pretend to be castles and fail. This one pretends to be a hand and succeeds. It holds what it can heat breath, a circle of attention. In the radius of that attention, you exist correctly. You draw your cloak tighter and lift your feet nearer to the hearth. The soles begin to feel again, first as pins, then as warmth. The smell in the room deepens as the embers gather courage. Smoke learns your hair. Wool learns your name. If you were to step back outside now, the cold would strike like praise, clear and honest, but you do not. You stay where the human temperature lives, which is to say, where others are. By habit or grace, your hands reach for the last small task. You pull a scrap of linen from the edge of the hearth and fold it double and lay it gently over the glowing core, banking the fire without denying it. A soft hiss answers the sound of tomorrow agreeing to exist. The light settles into a ruby. The room inhales. You exhale. For a moment, it seems possible that winter is not the enemy, only the world reminding you how warmth is made. The door has stopped its small talk with the wind. The rafters hold steady. The child's breath finds a slower rhythm. The mother's joins it. The cow's floats above like a steady drum. You lean back against the wall, and the wall is cooler than your spine, and that is all right. Your eyes adjust to the kind of darkness that is not a threat. It is a blanket in a colour your language does not have woven from smoke and tiredness, and the good news that nothing terrible is happening this minute. This, then, is how the winter opens, not with a howl, but with a room that decides to be a heart. Not with triumph, but with twigs arranged in a geography of patience. You do not conquer anything, you consent. You do the work of a few careful breaths, and you give the fire one more chance, and you let the house keep you the way a hand keeps an ember cupped from wind. Somewhere far away, a bell might exist, but here time is measured by the soft collapse of coals and the small courage of staying. When at last your eyes lower, it is not defeat. It is the body choosing its old religion sleep as agreement with the dark that is not dangerous. The ember hums a low vowel. The room hums it back. You lean toward the warmth one last inch, and the inch answers. Behind your lids the orange swims the colour of reasons. The cold waits respectfully at the edges. Mourning a word with frost on it is nothing more than a rumour you trust. By now, your eyes can read the room the way a farmer reads. Weather through texture and temperature more than outline. The light from the hearth has chosen its country, the floor, the knees, the undersides of hands. What it refuses is as useful as what it reveals. You begin to perceive the house not as a container, but as a layered instrument tuned to one note in winter. Keep the heat that is made, spend it like coin. Never forget how quickly cold collects interest. Start with the skin of the place. The walls are wattle and daub, upright stakes woven with pliant hazel or willow, then plastered with a mixture that remembers the field clay, dung-chopped straw, perhaps hair from the cow sleeping 10 feet away. Between your fingers, the daub feels like dried bread with grit inside. It is not straight. It is not ashamed of that. The wall bows where the wind has lectured it longest, and bulges where an old repair was eager. You can see handprints, fossilized in ridges, adult palms. A smaller hand, at a lower height, where a child once patted the mud into place. Architecture here is autobiography. Low above the roof is a thatch of reed and straw, thick as a winter quilt and just as full of stories. Years of smoke have blackened the inner face into a mild shine, and the soot holds the memory of countless fires, thin layers stacked like rings in a tree. The rafters are crooked in the honest way of wood that grew while wind spoke to it. Between two beams, a nest long abandoned has become a pocket for saved things. A charred wedge of pine used as kindling, a broken spoon that still knows how to stir, a bundle of rushlights tied with a strip of linen. Nothing here graduates to trash quickly. Even failure is kept for parts. The window is a stubborn, square-oiled linen stretched on a frame, its surface crisscrossed with the fingerprints of years of rubbing in fat and resin. You look at its frost-feathered face and realize it does not show the outside, it edits it. Moonlight becomes rumor. Daylight will become a promise that can be believed without being bright. In deeper cold, this square will be stuffed with rags and straw and resigned thought. Even light must pay for its passage. The floor holds the room's most truthful map. Packed earth remembers everyone's habits. There is a smooth trough from door to hearth, polished by 1,000 feet and the sliding of a wooden bucket. There is a soft patch under the low rail where chickens roost powdered with dust fine as talc. Near the bedplace straw has been swept aside enough times to reveal a tray of hammered planks laid years ago in a half-respectful attempt at a platform. The planks flex and complain. You love them for trying. You begin to understand the smoke. It does not simply exit, it lives here. It drifts in a slow, thoughtful river under the thatch, then finds the vent or the gaps at the eaves and relocates itself to the sky. In travelling, it performs 3 labours. First, it warms what cannot be warmed, otherwise the high air, the thatch that would drink rain, if not cautioned against rot and insects. Second, it cures the house, driving its scent into every fibre until the place itself becomes weatherproofed by memory. Third, it dignifies everything it touches. Even a twig in smoke pretends to be incense. Your hair is already learning this liturgy. Listen, the hearth breathes. The inhalation is the whisper of draught through the door's frayed edges. The exhalation is the soft roar of flame when a split log opens along its hidden seam. You arrange fuel as if composing a thought-big ideas at the back, small connective tissue at the front. The hook above the fire grips its iron with tired patience. A small pot hangs there black with years and competent with whatever is asked porridge broth. A handful of dried peas reimagined as dinner. The lip is chipped where someone once knocked it on stone in a hurry. The chip has a shine hurry is common. Around the fire evidence of planning accumulates. Herbs hang from a beam, rosemary, thyme, a bitter thread of wormwood that announces itself even above smoke. These are seasoning, yes. They are also medicine, and they are also belief. A sprig in the bedding to insult fleas, a handful in water to instruct a fevered chest, a smudge on a threshold to make a line. Spirits will hesitate to cross. In this room, the boundary between remedy and ritual is intentionally smudged. Anything that might help is allowed too. You study the sleeping arrangements without staring. A straw mattress sack stuffed with last summer's field makes an island beside the hearth. It is not smooth. The straw refuses to be tamed into softness, but it will be forgiven for providing height. Beneath is earth, above is wool. Between is the ceremony called night. The covering is a patchwork, a mantle gone to holes, a cloak retired from weather duty, a blanket that once belonged to another household and now belongs to everyone who needs it. You can smell the clean logic of lanolin and the less clean logic of living. The pillow is something between a folded garment and a hopeful name. Animals complete the design. The cow is not decoration. She is a slow furnace on 4 legs. Her warmth lifts the room's temperature by a thin, merciful measure. Her steady breath contributes moisture, a softness for lungs, bathed in smoke. The hen on the rail offers nightly commentary in feathers, a quiver when the roof drops snow. A complaint when the fire's brightness changes, shape a muted purr when morning begins to consider itself. A pig might be here in deeper cold, a barrel-shaped argument for shared quarters. In such a room, species are not strangers. Everyone pays rent in heat. You notice where people have edited the draft. Strips of cloth are stuffed between door and jamb. Moss is thumbed into cracks like green putty. In one corner, a square of woven hurdle leans against the wall, and you realize it serves as a portable barricade for especially mean wind. A line of pebbles under the door marks the place where meltwater once claimed dominion. Ash has been sifted onto it to persuade the floor back toward dryness. Housekeeping here is a set of small, sane preemptions. A chest against the wall is the household's memory. Its lid creaks, but you do not open it. You know by its dignity what it holds. The good linen, the shirt that can shame a feast into thinking it's a holiday, the coins that would not survive a pocket, the pages, if any exist, where a hand has copied a prayer until it learned the shape, by muscle instead of mind. Sometimes a chest is also a bench, sometimes a bed for the smallest body. Furniture is not one thing, it is a collection of agreements. Tools hang like blunt stars. An iron knife, a whetstone on a leather thong, a ladle burned smooth by years, wooden pegs that dignify repetition. Beside the hearth, a clay pot of tinder, the brown moss, the dry shavings, the precious scrapings saved from the day's work. Fire is not a rite, it is a skill renewed. You can see where someone has banked embers under ash, a white grave beneath, which the red sleeps until breath wakes it. Each morning will be a modest resurrection. There is a place for eating, and it is wherever the fire throws a circle generous enough to hold bowls. The bench becomes a table when the wooden board is laid across 2 stools. A wedge of bread is placed with the seriousness you would give to gold. A bit of salted meat becomes proof that last summer existed. Spoons travel from hand to hand, rinsed in a cup of stewing water, which is fine because everything here belongs to everything else. The taste of the room enters the food, and nobody complains. Smoke is the house's signature. It signs every dish. Smell is education. Damp wool tells you what weather has just happened. Soot tells you which way the wind has pretended not to blow. A ghost of cabbage means there was a feast earlier by winter standards. Sour ale introduces itself from a wooden mug by the wall, more tonic than indulgence, safer than the nearby well when Thaw turns earth to idea. On nights of hardest frost, a note like metal appears at the back of the nose, the cold making its own perfume. You file these lessons. In this world, knowledge is as warm as wool. Sound may be the most intelligent occupant. The house creaks in dialect, a high, thin complaint, when the wind hauls at the eaves. A deeper, satisfied stretch when the fire grows louder. You can hear the logic of sleepers' long breaths, where warmth has done its work, short, ragged ones. From the elder who has made a life of smoke and will pay its price in coughs. The cow rubs her neck against a post, and the wood answers like a cello. In a pause between embers, a mouse earns its living. The hen vetoes this with a cluck, so quiet it is practically thought. You become fluent without trying. You look up to the rafters again and notice a cluster of things tied in twine, a tiny bundle of hair, a small iron key, a sprig of something long dried. Charms, keepsakes, insurance. In houses that speak many languages, faith, luck, habit, meaning is cumulative. Perhaps the hair is from a child who survived a fever. Perhaps the key once opened a lock that no longer exists. Perhaps the sprig remembers a field no one owns now. You do not sneer at any of it. Survival has room for symbols. The draft returns and is persuaded to leave again. The smoke lifts and lowers like prayer. You feel the heat pulling at your cheeks, a soft tug, the way light tugs at water. If you had to name the room's character, you would say cooperative. Nothing here believes in heroism. Everything here believes in participation. The walls do their slow work. The roof its slower. The floor holds memory. The window compromises. The hearth negotiates. The smoke blesses and scolds. The people and animals in it provide fuel of a second kind attention, maintenance, presence. There is a temptation to judge this house by comfort, resist it, judge it by competence. In terrible weather, it keeps air above freezing, where breath can still be seen food, warm enough to behave like food, hands dexterous enough to sew, to mend, to cradle. It fails honestly and is repaired honestly. In summer, when heat loosens everything, the same smoke that aches your chest in January will preserve the thatch from visitors with too many legs. The house is a set of bargains solemnly kept. You feel your thoughts slowing to the correct speed for winter. Every task breaks into smaller tasks, and none of them are complicated, and all of them are necessary. Turn the log, close the gap, shake the straw, lift the bucket, bank the ember, save the twig. This too is architecture, a choreography of hands that fits the room like a glove. The house has taught you how to move without spilling heat. Before you sleep again, you stand and press your palm lightly to the daub. The wall returns the touch with a cool steadiness, as if the earth itself were promising to hold your outline until morning. Smoke passes between you and the roof with the indifferent grace of weather. You pull the blanket up over your shoulder and lie down on straw that crackles with a small polite thunder. The cow exhales once. Somewhere under the bench the mouse reconsiders ambition. You close your eyes to a house that is not beautiful by design and is therefore beautiful by duty. The last thing you notice is the taste of the air, oak and peat and wool, and the faint sweetness of dried herbs slowly giving back their summer to the room. You inhale that flavour and feel the edges of cold retreat another inch. The house inhales with you. Then the smoke which has been teaching you all night how to stay exudes a gentle syllable that might be now. You obey and drift as the roof writes one more thin layer of memory in soot, and the winter writes one more thin layer of patience in you. The fire is smaller than you remember, and yet it feels alive in a way that people rarely are. It is the first thing you see when you wake, and the last thing to fade when your eyes close. Everything that happens in this house happens because of it, not around it, not near it, but because of it. The room is still dark, the air heavy with sleep and ash. The embers glow like eyes under a blanket, patient and aware. The fire doesn't roar or crackle tonight. It hums a low, steady breath that seems to match your own. The warmth radiates in uneven circles, fading with each inch from the hearth. It is enough to remind you that life here is measured not by time, but by distance from heat. You sit up slowly, careful not to disturb the straw or the people bundled nearby. A mother stirs first, turning toward the cradle at her side. The faint rustle of cloth sounds louder than it should. The baby doesn't cry, only sighs a tiny sound that folds perfectly into the rhythm of the room. Her hand finds the infant by memory, checking for warmth the way a priest checks for prayer. Across the hearth, an old man shifts under his blanket. You see the thin arc of his shoulders, his breath visible in the half-light. The fire paints his skin the colour of old oak, and for a moment he looks carved from the same wood that holds the roof above him. His cough breaks the silence dry and short, and the sound startles the hen roosting on a beam. Feathers shiver, then settle. Life rearranges itself quietly. You move closer to the fire and crouch beside it. The ash whispers beneath your fingers. Beneath the pale crust warmth waits. You stir the embers gently with the iron poker, not to wake the fire, but to remind it you are still here. Sparks rise like small thoughts, each one trying for heaven before falling back to earth. Someone has left a log nearby damp at the edges. You place it carefully on the coals, leaning it just so letting the air move through the space beneath. There is no hurry in this work. Fire likes patience. It remembers kindness. When the first curl of smoke begins to form, you blow softly. The smoke thickens grey, turning gold, and then light leaps out as if it was never gone. The glow touches the walls first. It crawls over the clay, and straw filling the lines where hands once pressed mud into place. The room stretches as though the warmth were loosening its joints. In that glow, objects appear familiar, humble, and miraculous in their persistence. A chipped bowl, a wooden ladle, a bundle of herbs tied with faded string. Beside the wall sits a small bench dark, with soot and years of elbows. The bench is both seat and altar. Around it, life happens in circles. The fire's crackle grows stronger now, thin flames licking upward, pale as breath. The light reflects in the eyes of those beginning to stir. A child, no more than 8, crawls out from beneath a shared blanket hair, wild and face smudged with the ghost of yesterday's ash. He sits by the fire, cross-legged, rubbing his hands together, as though praying to the flame itself. Perhaps in a way he is. A woman nearby the mother perhaps reaches for a small iron hook above the fire. From it hangs a pot, blackened and dignified. She adds a little water, a handful of oats, and a scrap of salt. The sound of bubbling is soft and constant, the morning's first voice. The smell is honest smoke, damp grain, a hint of yesterday's stew. It is the scent of work before work begins. You watch how the fire commands respect. No one speaks loudly near it. Even the children who play with sticks treat it as something between a toy and a god. One careless ember could turn this fragile world into a ruin of smoke and ash. Every family in the village knows a story of a fire that escaped of roofs eaten by flame of fields lit like candles. So they keep the hearth watched, tended, prayed to, in silence. Historians write that many cottages burned at least once in a lifetime. The thatch above the straw underfoot everything here feeds flame as easily as it resists cold. Yet no one curses the danger. To lose fire is worse than to fear it. You think of how this heat comes from the forbidden forests, from branches gathered quietly, when the Lord's men weren't looking. Peasants were not allowed to cut trees freely. Even fallen limbs belonged to someone else. So they learned to take only what the wind had already stolen: twigs, peat dried, dung bundles of thorn. Fire, then, is not only warmth, it is theft turned into survival. The mother stirs the pot again. Steam curls upward and joins the smoke gathering beneath the roof. The air thickens fragrant in a rough way, food and flame, sweat and hope. You feel it in your throat as you breathe a taste that is half hunger, half gratitude. The baby makes a soft sound, and the woman hums in answer. It is a tune without melody, a sound meant to hold space more than fill it. You study the hearth more closely. It is nothing grand, just a pit of stones arranged with care, a circle blackened by generations. Yet in this circle every story begins. Here meals are made garments, dried wounds, warmed prayers whispered. The fire is both ancestor and witness. It has seen laughter, hunger, death, and the quiet miracle of another morning. Hanging above the herbs move slightly in the draught. Their shadows dance on the wall like slow handwriting. Rosemary, lavender, if fortune allows sometimes wormwood or sage, these are not decorations, but small defences. They flavour food, sweeten air, and in their own silent faith guard against spirits that travel on the cold. A branch of holly, pinned above the hearth, promises good dreams, though no one truly sleeps long enough to test it. The fire crackles, and the old man coughs again. The sound is softer now, less like pain, and more like a ritual his body refuses to forget. He sits up blinking toward the light, his face wrinkled not by age alone, but by years of squinting through smoke. He mutters a greeting to no one in particular, a sound more like breath than speech. His eyes settle on the flame, and he crosses himself once. To him, the sign is not about faith or doctrine. It is gratitude that the ember survived the night. You see it then, the way each life here orbits the fire's small gravity. A mother feeds it, a child studies it, an elder blesses it. It binds them together as surely as hunger. When someone leaves the house to fetch water, to check the livestock, to visit another cottage, the fire remains behind their silent delegate. And when they return, their first glance is for the glow. Is it still alive outside the wind prowls? It slides through the gaps in the door, teasing the edges of the room. But the flame does not flinch. The fire seems to hum louder, aware of its rival just beyond the threshold. The snow might cover fields, freeze rivers, erase paths, but it cannot enter here. The fire guards the boundary between the human and the vast indifference outside. You add another small stick, and the flames accept it without ceremony. The wood sighs its moisture, hissing into the air. You think about the centuries of breath that have passed through this same smoke. Peasants, wanderers, mothers, children, all of them feeding this same quiet furnace. Every flake of ash is a fossil of those who lived before. The air thickens again, and you feel your eyes sting. Smoke rises and curls along the ceiling like a second roof. Historians argue that it kept insects away, that it preserved the thatch, that it shortened lives. Perhaps all three are true. You cough once, and it feels like a handshake with history. The room smells of continuity, the dense sweetness of peat, the salt of skin, the strange metallic taste of endurance. Near the hearth, a cradle rocks gently as if stirred by the draught. The baby sleeps again, face soft and expressionless, unaware of the world's cold geometry. A cat you hadn't noticed before slips out from under the bench and stretches beside the fire. It turns once, twice, then settles curling into a perfect shape of contentment. For a second, everything in the room, the mother, the old man, the child, even you, seems to follow that same rhythm of breathing. The fire glows steady, and the house becomes a living lung. There is a story villagers sometimes tell that the first fire was stolen from the gods, and every flame since then is a small act of defiance. Here that story feels true. Each spark is rebellion made visible. Each ember is faith kept in secret. The mother ladles porridge into a bowl, hands it to the child, then takes her own. They eat slowly, each bite cooled by the air, before the next. The old man holds his bowl near the light, not because he needs to see it, but because food deserves warmth too. The sound of spoons scraping wood fills the silence like quiet rain. When the meal ends, the pot is rinsed and left by the hearth to dry. The fire is banked again, not extinguished, only taught to sleep. Ash covers the coals like snow, sealing their pulse. You realize that tending a fire is the truest form of prayer here. the daily practice of watching, feeding, preserving, and never taking for granted what burns. You sit back and let the warmth reach your face. Smoke curls upward, carrying the scent of oats and breath and soot. The air hums with contentment. Around you, the family settles again into stillness. The child back under the blanket, the old man's cough softened to a sigh. The mother humming once more as the cradle moves in rhythm with the flicker of light. The fire burns lower but not weaker. It has learned its shape. The flames bend inward, glowing red as heart muscle. This small circle of heat is enough to keep the dark polite, the cold, obedient the world believable. For a moment you understand why the peasants never cursed their poverty. They lived inside its warmth. They shared breath with fire and smoke, and in that sharing they found something older than comfort, the quiet, ordinary holiness of survival. And so you stay there a little longer, letting the light rest on your hands, listening to the soft music of wood collapsing into ember. Outside the wind whispers the same word, over and over, cold, cold, cold. But in here, the answer comes back steady and human, alive, 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 alive. If the hearth is the heart, the straw bed is the lung. It expands and settles, with the household drawing in warmth, sighing out the day. You learn its grammar by lying down upon it carefully at first, then with the trust of someone letting themselves be held by an older story. The bed is not a piece of furniture so much as a landscape. It begins with earth packed cool and slightly damp on days when the frost has argued through the wall. Over that, a coarse layer of reeds or brush lays down a first horizon to lift sleepers away from ground cold. Then comes the sack that holds everything hopeful. The sack is linen, if fortune has smiled, hemp, if she only nodded. Patched again and again until its own history is a quilt of stitches. Into it goes last summer, rye straw, oat straw, whatever the field forgave. Sometimes there's chopped bracken, sometimes a disloyal handful of chaff that pricks like truth. The tick bulges where generosity met free time, and sags where both ran out. You press your palm to it and feel the honest protest of stems. They crackle softly like distant frost. There is a smell-dry sweetness, the ghost of sun, a stubborn hayloft memory that refuses winter's edits. If you listen close, you can almost hear August muffled but still conversant bees pretending to be coins grain, speaking in yellow sentences, heat saying yes too often. The bed is an archive, and your body is its reader. Everyone has a place in this geography. The elder takes the warmest lee back to the hearth's glow. The mother and baby claim the curve where drafts get lost. The child tucks into whatever harbour is left, a small shape that fits in the negative space adults don't use. Modesty is a practical choreography, not a performance. People sleep in the clothes they worked in shirts, long as half-remembered prayers, wool that turns breath back upon the skin. Boots are loosened, not banished. Stockings are kept in the bed's kingdom because mornings bite. There is a ceremony to arranging the covers. First, the blanket with more holes than fabric, then the cloak whose clasp is long lost, then the pelt that smells faintly of rain. If there is a good blanket, one bought with a pig's small death, or a season's spun thread, it lies nearest to the baby, because what is precious should learn early how to guard what is more precious still. On bitter nights, a spare sack is pulled over feet, like a small sensible tent. The edges are tucked not by habit, but by need. A tucked edge is a wall, an untucked edge is a thesis on cold. Now the practical witchcraft begins. A sprig of rosemary or a pinch of wormwood is scattered into the straw, a perfumed insult to fleas whose arguments with human skin are relentless. Some took a thread of holly under the tick to keep nightmares respectful. Others sprinkle a little salt, that stubborn alchemy of earth and sea, to confuse whatever travels after midnight. A horseshoe's cunning curve may be nailed above the bedplace iron, persuading luck to stay. Skeptics sleep just as well. Faith here is an excellent sleeping draught, and so is disbelief. Then the small warfare. Lice are a nation without borders. They declare sovereignty over scalps and seams, over the republics of collar and cuff. A fine-toothed comb sits on the bench, a grim little harp, played every few evenings. Fat combed through hair smoke, borrowed as ally shirts boiled, when water can be spared. These are treaties rather than victories. Everyone itches, everyone refrains from making a spectacle of it. In summer, bedding is aired out on hedges. In winter, it is beaten indoors, like a drum that flatters dust. The hen finds opportunity in this festival, picking at imagined delicacies, and you laugh softly, because the alternative is to despise living, which is not allowed. Lie down, and the bed answers with a sound like paper learning to be river. Your shoulder finds the hollow that yesterday's shoulder made. Your hip discovers both complaint and solution. The straw redistributes its opinion of you. The first sensation is prickliness. The second is gratitude. The third is an agreement struck somewhere between rib and reed. With a practiced hand, someone nearby punches the tick 2 quick blows to resettle the tangle, and the surface evens out as if a field had been reharrowed. The straw is not clever about staying still. It migrates toward the edges, remembers the exits, tries for doorways, because all things try for doorways. Every week or two more often, in a household that minds itself, the tick is untied and the stuffing teased back towards centre. New straw is added if the cow has forgiven a corner of her winter feed, or if the threshing left kindness behind. In deepest winter, when generosity thins, the old straw is bullied into one more tour of duty. It will be field again one day, compost that teaches soil to be bred. Nothing here ends. It changes departments. Listen to the bed once bodies have found their cities. You hear tiny fireworks of broken stems. You hear breath calibrate to sleep's slower mathematics. The elder's breath is a saw smoothing a stubborn board. The mother's a tide. The child's a candle, sometimes nearly blown out. Under it all, the house keeps its own metronome wind rubbing thatch ember collapsing, to ruby a draught, admitting defeat, then attempting pride again. Somewhere beneath the bench, a mouse rehearses theft. The hen vetoes with a dream sound. The mouse studies other careers. The bed is not only for sleep, it is a parliament of whispers. Stories gather here, the ones with teeth and the ones with wings. A tale about the saint who lent a loaf to winter and was paid back in lambs. A tale about the Lord whose barns burned because he pinched the wrong beggar. A tale about the mayor who spoke, but only in fog. These are not entertainment, so much as inoculations. Children learn which fears have names, and which merely wear masks. Laughter happens quietly, the way coals break into brighter geometry. Warmth in a straw bed is a cooperative enterprise. Bodies lend heat to bodies. You fold around the person beside you the way a hillside folds around a sheep. Some nights, a pig is invited to be a radiating law. It snores judicially and offends nobody except the straw, which speaks sharply and is ignored. A cat chooses the concavity behind knees. The air within the covers becomes a climate with its own politics. Less smoke, more salt, an intimacy of breath that would be impolite in a larger world, and is logical here. You learn the vocabulary of the shoulder. You borrow the little twitch that means dream, the long exhale that means safe. The body's complaints are real, but they are filed and addressed with a bureaucracy of kindness. A back knotted from ruts and hose is soothed by a warmed stone wrapped in cloth and smuggled under the blanket like contraband sunrise. A cramp in the calf is kneaded without commentary by the nearest hand. A cough is met with a sip of something hot water that pretends to be broth ale, that pretends to be medicinal, and a touch to the sternum as if the chest were a stubborn door. In this economy, attention is the currency that never devalues. There is humour tucked into the straw because there must be. Jokes travel quietly across pillows. The straw is learning to write because it scratches so much. The bed has grown 2 inches since yesterday because everyone told such tall stories. The fleas are paying rent in blood and overpaying. Laughter under blankets is a craft heat-friendly and draft-safe. No one laughs at anyone. Everyone laughs at the conditions. The night softens. Sometimes the bed is also a chapel. The Our Father is said not to the ceiling, but to the space under the blanket where breath hangs like incense. Names of the dead are recited at the rate of the heart. Uncertainties are itemized and placed carefully in the dark as if darkness were a strongbox. The sign of the cross is traced half on wool, half on skin. If a charm is muttered salt, iron, holly, rosemary, it isn't to scandalize heaven. It's to persuade the anxious animal brain to close its bright eyes. The straw bed also knows the discipline of waking within the night that hinge between first sleep and second sleep, though the philosophy of that belongs to tomorrow's telling. For now, it is enough to say that the bed releases and reacquires its citizens without fuss. Those who rise to feed the fire return to the same impression their bodies left as if the bed had been saving their shapes in escrow. The tick is a memory palace. You re-enter yourself exactly. Dreams have a texture here. They bear the imprint of straw and smoke. They are lit in ember light and scored for wind. You dream of haylofts that go on forever, of cows speaking Latin, of roads that are made of linen, the very same weave as your shirt. Sometimes fear comes in because fear is a door-to-door peddler with infinite patience. But fear is smaller in a crowded bed. It has to argue with breathing. It loses its eloquence against wool. What of mornings? They are birthed inside the bed, long before the door allows them in. A child wakes and counts the people they can touch without moving anything but a hand. A mother times her stirring to the ember's endurance. The elder negotiates with his knees and usually wins. There is a sound like old paper as blankets are persuaded to be day clothes again. The bed gives up its tenants with a shuffle and a creak that is not discontent but conclusion. Maintenance begins immediately because maintenance is the religion that keeps winter from thinking it's in charge. Blankets are hung for a minute by the hearth to let smoke kiss them into something like cleanliness. The tick is thumped like a stubborn story until the straw redistributes its bias. A line is pulled from the rafters and shirts learn steam. The hen opportunistically inspects the bedplace for fictions worth pecking. Someone rescues a lost spoon that emigrated to the straw during yesterday's porridge. If you look closely, you see how the bed teaches economy of gesture. Climb in feet first, always toward warm. Turn once, not thrice. Pull blanket with one hand, while the other hand finds the edge and tucks because heat escapes at the speed of carelessness. These are small laws and non-negotiable. Children learn them before letters. The straw enforces them with a rustle of disapproval when you forget. There are beds of status in the manor, carved and curtained, set upon platforms like polite altars. This is not that. This is the people's geography of rest, its map drawn fresh each night by limbs. It will not be painted, but it will be remembered by bodies that age into stories and hearts that measure wealth in unbroken sleep. Its luxury is the precise amount of heat you do not lose, and the exact number of breaths you can take without coughing. When illness comes, and it always comes, the bed becomes a small hospital. A child's fever turns it into a weather event everyone attends to. Cool cloths are laid like treaties on a hot brow. Elderflower is coaxed into water. The ember is asked politely for just a little more kindness. The bed warms a failing body too, and hears the last words that are not always words. Afterwards, straw is changed, as if grief were a kind of ash. Life remains, beds continue. The house edits its memory with a tenderness that refuses spectacle. The truth is simple without being sentimental. The straw bed is both less and more than you want. Less softness, more participation. Less privacy, more belonging. It will scratch you into wakefulness just when the dream was turning kind. It will hold your heat as if you were a necessary coal. It is honest about cost and stubborn about worth. When you leave it in the morning, you do not bless it out loud, but your bones do. When you return at night, the straw makes that quiet thunder again, and your body remembers the password, a sigh shaped like gratitude. Before sleep takes you, you turn once toward the hearth. The ember is a red idea that refuses to become past tense. You turn back toward the shoulder you borrow. The straw mutters, then agrees. Outside snow rehearses erasing. Inside the bed practices keeping. You let go in increments, the way a field lets go of summer, and the straw receives each inch of surrender, cataloguing your weight beside the many who have lain here, and taught the same lesson, that comfort is not a product, but a choreography. Of patience, bodies, and borrowed Sunday. Night in a peasant's house is not a single thing, but a rhythm divided by breath and ember. It is two acts of the same play, separated by a silence long enough to remember that time exists. The scholars who study old diaries call it first sleep and second sleep, but the names feel too tidy for something this natural. To those who live here, it is simply how darkness behaves. It opens, pauses, and opens again. You are half awake already hovering in that shallow water between rest and return. The fire has diminished to its smallest vocabulary, a faint hiss, a shifting sigh, the quiet tick of cooling ash. The room is washed in the dull red of dying light. Everything is both visible and invisible, as if the house itself were exhaling dreams. You feel the chill press gently against your blanket, testing the edges, looking for entry. The air smells of wet wool and smoke that has lost its temper. You turn once the straw answering, with a sound like whispering parchment. This is the middle of the night, though no one calls it that. Time here is not counted by hours, but by the courage of embers. Someone must rise soon to tend them. It will be the person who sleeps the lightest, or loves the warmth the most. Tonight, it is you. You slide carefully from the bedding, so as not to disturb the others. A mother murmurs. A child turns over the cow, shifts her weight with a sigh that could be mistaken for human. The floor greets your bare feet with its usual blunt honesty, cold as memory, uneven as truth. You move toward the hearth, guided by the faint pulse of heat. The ashes wear a thin crust of grey. Beneath a few coals still breathe their glow, faint but alive. You crouch rake gently with the poker, uncovering the red heart of the house. Tiny sparks rise like thoughts returning from a dream. You add a handful of twigs, the kind stored in a basket close to the wall. They catch quickly, and a new flame flutters up, trembling, like a prayer uttered half asleep. Smoke begins to climb again, lazy and deliberate. Its scent is familiar, and almost human, tired, persistent, uncomplaining. The warmth reaches your face, and you breathe deeper, feeling the slow thaw of fingers and thought. Behind you, the breathing of the others continues, steady and layered. A chorus of small human sounds, the rustle of wool, a sigh, the quiet click of a tongue, becomes a kind of music, not composed, but lived. The room is alive in every direction. You sit for a while, staring at the flame, as if it were a clock. It keeps time without numbers, measuring the distance between darkness and dawn. This is the hour when the mind loosens. Thoughts that could not find their place in daylight drift forward now, slow, patient, unguarded. You remember faces you have not seen for years, words you meant to say, but stored away, like forgotten tools. The silence encourages confession. It is said that monks rise at this hour to pray, and peasants to think. Some whisper charms for the animals, some whisper apologies for themselves. The line between the sacred and the ordinary dissolves. The fire listens to everything. You reach for a piece of bread, left near the hearth, its crust hard, its inside faintly sweet with smoke. Hunger is not insulted by hour or ritual. You eat in small bites, letting the warmth return to your chest. The sound of chewing seems enormous in the hush. Outside, the wind speaks against the walls in slow vowels. Occasionally, a clump of snow slips from the thatch with a dull thud. Somewhere far off, a dog barks once, then twice, and then stops as if reminded of something beyond barking. You imagine the village out there, all the small cottages breathing together, each with its own ember, its own sleepless watcher. The world feels larger when it is invisible. You think about the way night divides itself. The first sleep belongs to the body-heavy, necessary animal. It gathers the day's exhaustion and folds it into silence. The second sleep belongs to the spirit lighter and stranger, full of wandering thoughts. Between them lies this narrow bridge of wakefulness, a pause long enough to remember who you are. Perhaps it is not even waking. Perhaps it is the soul surfacing for air. Old stories claim that dreams between sleeps are different. They say the first sleep gives you visions of hunger and work, while the second brings prophecy. You wonder if the scholars know how true that feels when you sit in the dark, neither tired nor awake, half believing that the fire itself might answer, if you ask kindly. You hear movement behind you. The old man has woken. His cough comes first, soft, familiar, then his voice roughened by years of smoke. Still burning, he asks, though the question needs no reply. He shifts closer, drawing a blanket around his shoulders. The two of you sit together in the half-light, not speaking much. Conversation at this hour does not require language. It is enough to share the same fire. After a while, he gestures toward the small pot on the hearth. You lift the lid. Inside, a little water from yesterday remains. You add a pinch of grain from a nearby sack. Stir it with the end of a stick and wait. The sound of simmering returns, low and forgiving. Steam rises, mixing with smoke. You both drink from the same wooden bowl, not for nourishment, but for the comfort of heat moving inward. He mutters something about the wind shifting about snow in the morning. You nod, though he isn't really speaking to you. He is speaking to the night, and the night answers by holding his words. When he has finished, he sits back and closes his eyes again. His breathing slows. Within minutes, he has drifted back into second sleep. You remain awake a little longer, watching the dance of flame and shadow. Each flicker seems to rewrite the room. The smoke paints new stories on the ceiling. The light touches each face, in turn, the child's, the mother's, the old man's, as if reminding itself who it keeps alive. Even the cow glows faintly, her breath rising in steady clouds. Everything that lives in this house shares the same slow pulse. Some say the first and second sleeps mirror the world itself day and night, labour and rest body and spirit. Maybe so. What you feel is balance the body's quiet decision to divide the darkness into parts it can endure. The pause between them is not emptiness, but restoration. It is where the mind learns to be gentle again. Your own eyelids begin to weigh down. You bank the fire carefully, spreading ash over the glowing core. The light dims to a red whisper. You lie back down beside the others, finding your own shape where the straw remembers you. The blanket welcomes you with its familiar roughness. This second descent into sleep feels different. The cold no longer threatens. The mind has been emptied of argument. You drift quickly without ceremony, like a leaf returning to the river that carried it yesterday. The sounds of the house close around you, the faint crackle of coals, the rhythmic breathing, the occasional shuffle of a hoof. The darkness feels less like an absence and more like a presence that means no harm. Dreams come, though they are not really dreams. They are murmurs of what you already know, the shape of the cottage, the smell of straw, the pulse of heat that rises and falls with your breath. You see the field under moonlight, frozen, and still yet promising green beneath. You hear voices that might belong to the past, or to no one at all. Sometime later, minutes or centuries, you wake again, though this time it is not the middle of the night, but the edge of dawn. The room is different. The darkness has thinned to a soft grey. The oiled linen of the window glows faintly, frost melting into small rivers of light. The air tastes clean, almost new. The embers still live under their shell of ash. When you stir them, they answer at once, flaring red, eager to become flame again. The others begin to wake, blinking, into the pale morning. The old man stretches and mutters about his knees. The mother checks the child's warmth. The cow shakes her head and snorts softly. No one speaks of the night's division. There is no reason to. It belongs to them as naturally as breath, that quiet seam between sleeps where the house itself seemed to dream. The fire reborn crackles its approval. Outside, a bird calls, once testing the morning, and the sound feels like a benediction. You realize then that the rhythm of the two sleeps is not a relic or a superstition. It is simply the body learning to live inside long winters, a partnership between exhaustion and endurance. First sleep is surrender. Second sleep is forgiveness. Between them lies the conversation with darkness that all living things must hold. The others begin to rise blankets, falling away the day, assembling itself piece by piece. You sit for a moment longer watching the light grow. The embers pulse brighter. You feel the warmth gather once more at the centre of the room, and you understand with the clarity that only the cold can teach that the night never truly ends here. It only changes colour. You stand, stretch, and look toward the door. Frost glints along the edges of the planks, delicate and temporary. Beyond it waits another day, another repetition of the same fragile miracle breathfire and the patience to wake twice before morning. Winter is a tutor with a hard curriculum. It teaches slowly and repeats itself until you pass or leave the class entirely. Illness is the lesson it favours. In this room, sickness does not arrive like thunder. It accumulates a fine dust on the workings of life. The cough comes first, the old man's short and dry like a hinge that has stopped believing in oil. Then the child's cough, wet at the edges. Then your own, a polite echo you try not to own. The smoke, which is ally and antiseptic and roofkeeper, is also tax collector. Each breath is a coin, and you pay. You notice the signs earlier now, because winter has trained your eyes. A slight glassiness in the child's gaze. The mother's hand lingering on the baby's back, measuring heat with a skill that does not need numbers. The elder pausing longer at the pot, not for food but for steam. Even the cow speaks in a new grammar breath heavier, a step slower when she shifts on her bedding. The house has a pulse. Illness is a skipped beat you can hear across the room. There is no surgeon here, and rarely a priest until the last chapter. Medicine is done with hands and fire, and plant memory. the bench becomes an apothecary. A bundle of thyme is untied, crushed between finger and thumb, until its green anger escapes. A handful of dried elderflowers is coaxed into a bowl, a scrap of linen becomes a filter and then a compress. Water warms on the hook, the pot lifted to the side where the heat is gentle. Steam rises, and the room's air becomes a recipe. You bring the child close to the pot and drape a cloth like a little tent, letting the steam insist on the lungs. The child complains without words. The mother hums a song that has only one note and many meanings. The cough loosens. A spoon of honey arrives, a rare sweetness kept for winter throats and bargaining with fever. Today honey is doctrine. It coats it, persuades it, says stay. What cannot be found in the rafters is borrowed from neighbours. A knock at the door, the rope latch lifted a face chapped with cold and concern. From the visitor's apron, a bit of horehound for the cough. From yours, a sprig of rosemary, because last week was their bad week. Poor doors swing open easily when illness knocks. Wealth is a tide of small things, going back and forth until everyone remembers the difference between lonely and alone. You heat a stone near the hearth, roll it in wool and tuck it at the child's feet. Contraband sunrise again, smuggled under blankets. The elder is given a cup in which hot water pretends to be beer and a pinch of ground mustard pretends to be a miracle. His eyes water, he calls it wicked, he drinks. The mother ribs him gently, which is how love makes itself unembarrassing. You add a pinch of salt to a basin and bathe the baby's forehead with a cloth wrung nearly dry. Salt remembers oceans. It is a small medicine against the inland of fever. Some remedies are fence-sitting between science and spell, and no one here minds the ambiguity. A red thread is tied around a wrist, not because thread cures, but because hope often wears red. A charm is said to street. Blaze, guardian of throats, and a finger touches the sign of the cross at the hollow at the base of the neck. Beside the hearth, a bit of iron sits in the embers for a while, then cools on the table, a quiet talisman against namelessness. You can call it superstition if you like. The house calls it participation. In winter, the mind also requires medicine. The cow coughs once, and you look up. If she sickens, milk fails. Without milk bread is a harsher food, and children tire sooner. You add clean straw to her place, and rub her neck with a scratch of warmth in your palm. A little mash warmed with the day's last hot water is brought to her lips. She leans into your hand the way a friend leans into a joke. Animals do not know doctrine, but they do know caretaking. She lowers her head and breathes thank you in a language made entirely of steam. Days flatten when illness invites itself to stay. Tasks don't vanish, they rearrange. The fire is coaxed into even temper. The pot lives at the lip of a simmer all day. Cloves are hung at a height that turns steam into treatment. Lice combing still happens, though slower. Floor sweeping happens by halves. The house accepts slightly more mess and slightly more mercy. On the bench, a little pile accumulates onion skins. The heel of a loaf turned into broth, a shard of garlic, a sliver of pork fat saved from a feast. No one can precisely remember. In winter, even memory is a condiment. At dusk, the neighbour returns with a horn cup and a story about a cousin saved by elderflower and rest. Stories are medicine that don't run out. They lower shoulders, lighten chests, move air around a room that has been holding its breath. The child dozes, on and off fever pitching, and retreating like a tired army. The old man sleeps in the manner of wrestlers. One eye almost open, one hand half closed, as if he intends to bargain with whatever comes. You measure time by the noise of the cough, loud at midnight, quieter at the hinge between sleeps. louder again when dawn thinks about happening. You bank the fire and you unbank it, and you learn that kindness requires repetition. A cough can be read like weather looses, hopeful, tight is a warning, silent is unsafe. You speak these judgments softly, and the mother hears them with gratitude and contradiction, and the authority of a heart that arranges itself around another's pulse. On the second day, the fever is a more polite guest. The child's eyes shine as fever's tide withdraws, leaving small shells of sweat on the brow. The elder coughs in punctuation now, not in paragraphs. He refuses the honey and asks Shameless for a sip of ale instead. His humour returns first, always a good omen. He jokes that saints cure better when paid in barley. The mother snorts church and barley both are on ration, and gives him a mouthful anyway because healing also wants happiness to eat. Not every winter keeps its promises. Sometimes fever turns stubborn and names itself something larger. Sometimes breath thins to thread. Sometimes a whole village learns one name at the same time. Ague flux pest a word that empties houses and fills graveyard ground. This year is not that year, not in this telling, but the house remembers years that were, and this memory tucks itself under the day's ordinary duties, like a stone under snow. You move with care, not because you are afraid, but because you know the stakes have measure. On the third evening, you hear the bell from the church down in the village, one long, slow voice. Someone has died. The room lowers its eyes without moving them. The mother's hand stills on the cloth. The old man bows his head in a habit older than his bones. The cow lifts her ears and settles them again. Grief is a draught that enters even through well-stuffed cracks. It cools the room an extra degree. You respond in the only way you can, another log, another kind word, a check of the child's brow, without making it an announcement. The tiny hearth of your household answers a larger night. Illness alters appetite. Pottage becomes sip by sip. Fat becomes medicine instead of feast. You mash a garlic clove with the back of a knife and pretend not to believe in its craft. You add a shred of leek that tastes like the memory of spring. If you had vinegar, you would brighten the stew and the spirit. If you had apples, you would remember October out loud. What you have is heat and the willingness to stir slowly. Sometimes that is enough. There are small luxuries that winter rarely grants, but illness sometimes earns. From the chest, a little linen white, when it was younger than smoke, is brought out and folded into squares that look like honesty. From a narrow shelf, a pinch of salt, not for food, but for water, sketched carefully into a bathing bowl for the baby's hands and face. From the rafters, a young sprig, saved more for scent than for soup, crushed now into the pot, as if summer could be coaxed from leaves by insistence. The house spends what it saved. It was always saving for this. At night, the room's music returns to the slow, low key that is health. The child breathes without complaint. The elder coughs only when turning. The mother paces the short distance from bed to fire, and back not from worry now, but because her body is finishing a conversation with fear. You sit awake for a while, not out of duty, but from gratitude's insomnia. The fire is a steady red. The smoke behaves. The thatch creaks like old friends telling stories they both know the endings of. You think briefly of all the other rooms like this one, scattered across a winter that does not care what name you call yourself by. Each has its ember, its exhausted caretaker, its remedies that are also prayers. Some hold a healer, a midwife who doubles as an herb wife, a man who has seen a barber surgeon work and will try a sober version of the trick with a horn and a flame. Some rooms hold nothing but hope and the determination to share it in spoonfuls. Tonight you are one of the lucky rooms. The child turns in sleep and does not wake. The elder dreams of something with animals in it. His hands twitch as if braiding straw. By morning the coughs are less dramatic, the house warmer by consent. The pot is rinsed and put back on its hook. The herbs are retied and hung to wait for their next vocation. The neighbour returns the horn cup and stands a moment by the door assessing the air the way a weather reader does. She nods once and says nothing, which in the dialect of survival means good. You tuck 2 onions into her hands anyway. She tucks a smile into yours and leaves. Trade perfected. Illness does not abandon a house cleanly. It leaves behind new rules. The child will be kept near the fire for 3 days, even after laughter returns, because relapse is a thief with excellent ears. The elder will be scolded into wearing his cap inside. The window's rag will be rearranged to let light in without letting dignity leak out. Hands will be washed in warm water more often, not because anyone has read a law, but because the house wrote one. The cow's bedding will be checked twice daily. She will be thanked, and the thanks will be practical. You sit at last and allow your spine to speak. It says ache, but in a tone of relief. The straw bed murmurs its willingness to be lung again tonight. The hearth, trimmed and tamped, presents a face of competence. Illness has not left the room stronger. That is a lie. People tell to feel wise, but it has left the room more attentive, and attention is the best shape of strength the poor can afford. You look to the door. Frost still writes its thin letters along the edges, but the script seems less stern. Somewhere outside the bell that tolled yesterday will toll again. Somewhere else a child will cough tonight. Winter's curriculum does not end. It repeats until spring interrupts like a generous substitute teacher. You cannot alter the syllabus. You can only get better at the homework. Before the day pushes you into chores, you take a quiet inventory. Hear a pot that knows how to simmer. Hear herbs that remember sunlight and are willing to share it as scent. Hear hands yours, the mothers, the neighbours, even the elders, reluctant ones willing to perform 100 small unfancy mercies. Hear a cow, a hen, a bed, a bench, a rope, a door. And hear, most stubborn of all, an ember that chose not to go out. You bend and feed the fire, a thin stick, nothing dramatic. The flame accepts it with the calm of a teacher who has seen many students recover their lessons. You breathe in smoke and plant and wool and the brief, clean line of cold that sneaks in by habit. The room breathes with you. Survival, you realize, is not a victory march. It is a metronome. Illness tugged at the tempo. You found it again. The house keeps time. You keep company. And winter tutor, tyrant nurse watches, satisfied that you are still taking notes. The house does not grow larger on the night a child decides to arrive. It grows denser. The air takes on the seriousness of a sentence that refuses a period. Even the smoke seems to slow its climb, as if listening for the moment when pain turns into a person. It begins the way many beginnings do here, with a pause in the day's ordinary music. The mother hand stained with the same work as everyone else's, goes quiet, then quieter still. She folds forward a little one hand at the low wall, the other at her belly, and breath becomes a craft, learned in a hurry. Around her, the room takes its instructions. Fire coaxed, brighter water, commanded warm herbs, recruited from their cathedral of rafters. The straw bed is cleared of its usual geography, and remade blankets shaken the good linen fetched from the chest as if inviting a guest, because one is coming. A child runs for the midwife. It is not a far run. In a village, expertise is never more than a field away. She arrives with the weather in her hair and a bag that is really a memory. Cloths, a horn cup, a knife wrapped in oiled rag, a rosary, 3 stories that calm fear. Her hands smell of smoke and thyme, and something tinny that might be blood from the last birth she attended. She does not announce herself as anything grand. She nods to the fire, nods to the mother, nods to the cow. She has learned to greet all sources of heat. The old man shifts his bed a respectful distance. The child is promoted to apprentice water warmer and blanket bringer. The neighbour already waiting at the door, the way news outruns, feet slips in and begins to grind a pinch of dried raspberry leaf, something for strength or belief or both. Everyone understands their role. Birth is not spectacle, it is choreography. The midwife washes her hands in the steaming bowl with the attention of a monk copying a line he loves. Clean, she says to the room, as much as to herself. The mother leans forward on the bench and breathes. The pattern is oceanic, in, out, with a swell that climbs and breaks and climbs higher. Between the swells, the midwife speaks in instructions that are mostly kindness-wearing verbs. Rest, drink, hold, now. Not yet. The fire is banked wide and steady, a low red choir that warms without offending. The pot hangs from its hook and ticks softly, the lid shivering as if keeping time. Smoke writes calm in the rafters. A sprig of rosemary is burned at the hearth, not because smoke sterilizes, which it does in its rough way, but because the scent tells the nervous half of the brain that this is not a storm, but a ceremony. Pain arrives and refuses to apologize for existing. The mother meets it with a sound that is not a cry, so much as a road open, long, honest. She has no luxury to be brave. Bravery is a word other people use. She is busy. Her hands find the midwife's forearms. The midwife's hands find the mother's hips. Her belly the hard truth of a head negotiating the narrow mathematics of bone. Good, she says, which means keep going. Slow, she says, which means trust the body to do what it has rehearsed in secret for months. Between surges, the mother drinks from the horn cup warm water with a lie of honey. Someone wipes her face with the good linen and pretends not to notice when tears have mixed with sweat. The child, wide-eyed solemn, holds the bundle of cloths like a squire on a small battlefield. The old man murmurs prayers at a distance. He does not say the name of the last birth he saw that ended badly. Names are powerful, and this room has chosen a different one tonight. The cow shifts and lets out a long breath, a sound like wind learning patience. Animals know when the room's gravity changes. The hen ruffles and resettles. The cat appears and becomes a comma by the fire, not intruding, simply allowing the sentence to breathe. The midwife's voice lowers to the pitch that convinces pain it is not in charge. Now, she says, and the word is a bridge. The mother crosses bearing a freight of blood and future. The push is not dramatic, it is precise. The room leans in. The fire brightens, as if someone opened its lungs. Their hair first slick and new, then the rounded insistence of a skull, then a face that is not yet a person's, only a possibility, then shoulders slippery and brave, then the rest a seal slipping back into water. The midwife's hands are everywhere and exactly where they need to be. She lowers the child gently onto the linen that has been waiting its whole life for this moment. Silence the thin kind for one heartbeat. Then the first sovereign sound, the new mouth, makes small indignant hole. The midwife rubs the tiny back with brisk kindness. The cry strengthens, finds its own throat. The mother's face changes in a way that the language of the house cannot name. She reaches, and the child is placed upon her, the skin of one meeting, the skin of the other heat, continuing its dynasty. Blood is attended without comment. This is a house that knows the difference between mess and miracle. The midwife works with efficient gentleness. She ties, she cuts, she checks. The knife is clean, in the way poor knives are made clean, boiled, smoked, wiped with vinegar that was saved for this. The cord is knotted with red thread, not magic exactly, but the style in which gratitude prefers to be seen. The child quiets at the breast mouth, finding its task with the wisdom of all the children who have taught this lesson before. The mother's breath, which had been an instrument built for labour, retunes itself toward lullaby. The midwife listens at her belly for the second birth, the afterbirth, and welcomes it with a knowledge that has outlived midwives whose names the village has forgotten. She lifts the bundle to the bowl, murmurs a word that is somewhere between thank you and you may go, and sets things in order, with calm that teaches the room to be orderly too. The neighbour cleans, not because dirt is moral, but because order is comfort. She wipes the bench, rinses the cloths, hangs them by the hearth, where smoke can do its coarse sterilizing. She adds new straw where blood has asked to be remembered, and covers it with linen, so that tomorrow's feet will not step into tonight's story. The child, older child, tiptoes in with a look that demands a verdict. The midwife smiles, with only her eyes, and nods him closer, lets him see the small fist opening and closing as if kneading dawn. Names are discussed not as a debate, but as a garden walk. The old man suggests one that belonged to his mother's mother. The neighbour argues softly for the saint whose feast day this nearly is. The mother rests and does not hurry to choose. Names are commitments. They are also maps. The midwife offers no opinion. She has seen names fit and misfit and change their bearers both ways. Steam rises from the pot. Someone has coaxed a handful of oats into meaning. The midwife eats standing the way people eat, when their hands will soon be needed again. She says she will stay until the first sleep, then second sleep, then dawn, however long it takes to be sure the room is not pretending at peace. No one argues. Payment will be what it always is: a little coin, a little cloth, a little meat. When meat exists, a promise to send a girl to help with her washing when the river thaws. She never goes unpaid. The ledger of a village keeps itself. The fire lowers to its night self banked wide ember bright. The smoke is patient. The house cools to the temperature of newness, which is warmer than fear. The mother's eyes close and open and close. Each time they open, they look for the child with a ferocity that is the opposite of violence. The child sleeps with that purity that belongs only to the freshly arrived limbs, like small question marks, breath practicing its future. The old man creeps forward and looks without touching a soldier newly in love with the ceasefire. He whispers something to the child, nonsense blessing confession. The neighbour folds the good linen and sets it aside its work, not done but resting. The apprentice water warmer is finally demoted to sleep. If this were a manor, a bell might ring, a record might be written in a hand that goats could not eat. Here, inscription is different. The soot on the rafters accepts another layer. The straw bed remembers one more shape. The bench adds a notch in the story it tells no one. The midwife will carry this house's new name in her mouth like a seed to other rooms, and in that way the village will know by noon. Outside snow turns its face toward the idea of morning. The sky does not change colour yet, but it considers it. Inside the fire persuades time to move like syrup. The midwife dozes upright without surrendering her attention. The mother dreams a dream where the child is still inside her and also in her arms, and the logic holds. The cow breathes a blanket over the room. The cat blinks and decides to keep being a comma. Birth has not made the house cleaner or richer. It has made it more itself. The rules remain: tend the ember, share the bowl stuff, the cracks laugh when you can. But something is added, a new gravity, small enough to fit in two hands. The room orbits it with a care that needs no instruction. Near dawn, the child fusses once and is soothed by warmth that does not need fire to explain itself. The mother's body, which has been a workshop, becomes a cradle. The midwife stands, stretches, listens, and pronounces the room ready for day. She smudges her hands on her apron and ties her bag. "You'll call," she says, meaning, "if the bleeding does not respect its boundaries, if the child forgets to swallow, if fear invents a new story." The mother nods, because she will. The door opens to a thin blade of cold. The midwife slips through it like a sentence finishing. The neighbour follows to spread the news along the path where footprints will soon be daylight. The house contracts to its ordinary size, which now includes one more heartbeat. The fire lifts its red face to the first rumour of light. A small hand opens, then closes, as if catching morning before anyone else can see it. The straw bed exhales. The house, which has practiced holding breath for months, releases it, and in the warm mist of that exhale, you can read the oldest word in winter's language continue. Spring does not arrive like a procession. It arrives like a hesitation made brave. First, there is a sound, the tick of a drip where icicles give up their sharpness. Then there is a smell, the shy metallic sweetness, when soil begins to thaw and remembers it is not stone. Then there is a colour, the pale green rumour, at the base of hedges. Not quite a leaf, yet only a plan. You wake into this and feel the room has exhaled in the night. The fire is modest this morning, a red that means we can share the work now. Smoke climbs without argument. The window's oiled linen sweats a little beads of melt, running down to the sill, drawing small rivers that will dry to salt. The straw bed releases you easily, no longer jealous of your heat. When your feet meet the floor, the earth is still cool but not combative. It allows toes instead of punishing them. You dress in fewer layers without deciding to. The wool keeps faith. The shirt has learned your shape. The cap becomes habit rather than armour. The child stirs and laughs in sleep, the kind of laugh the house has not heard in months. The mother sits up slowly and looks to the baby. Then the hearth. Then the door. In the same old order, but today her gaze lingers on the door. The old man stretches, and the stretch is longer, as if he has been saving it. Outside, the world holds its breath for a different reason. Snow thins along the edges of things. Posts, stones. The well curb like white thought forgetting itself. The path to the byre reappears as a dark seam in the field. The eaves do their steady work drip, drip, the kind of patience that fills barrels. A crow announces the weather like a clerk, reading out loud, important but not final. You open the door and let the day enter. It smells of wet wood, thawed straw, and the distant mint of new grass, inventing itself under last year's hay. The cow steps from her stall with a surprised dignity, as if remembering she has knees. She blinks at her own breath in the warming air. The hen launches into a lecture and finds worms where yesterday there was only certainty. The cat pursues a sun rectangle across the floor, a geometry lesson with purring. The first work of spring is not planting, it is repair. You walk the roofline with your eyes cataloguing where thatch slipped and where wind wrote its opinion too loudly. A tuft here needs a bundle, a seam there needs a stitch. The fence posts have learned to wobble. You firm them with the good foot and a rock like a punctuation mark. The door's rope has frayed. You splice it with the leftover length that has been waiting for this job or for a job like it. Winter teaches thrift. Spring remembers assignments. Inside the chest gives up its small treasures. Seeds, hard commas in a cloth packet, smell faintly of dust and promise. You pour them into your palm, and the room seems to lean forward to look. Beans, moons, not yet fat. Barley, a handful of tiny sons with modest ambitions. Peas, sleeping fists. You sort and count as if counting could bribe fate. Perhaps it can a little. In this house, numbers have always been negotiations. Neighbours appear at doorways without knocking. Spring is communal by nature. A man from 2 cottages over offers a few willow twigs for mending the hurdle. A woman brings last year's saved leek seed in exchange for help lifting a stubborn stone. The midwife passing pauses to hold the new child and pronounce the colour good and the weight honest. She has a private weather for babies and plants, and it is always more accurate than the skies. You pay her with thanks, with a heel of bread, with the promise of shoulders at haying time. The field is not ready, but it is less not ready than yesterday. You walk it anyway, boots, taking the measure of the softness eyes, learning where water lingers and where wind dries. The furrows show their bones. At the far edge, a bent willow wakes with a shiver as if a memory brushed its bark. You kneel and press your palm to the soil. It is colder than your hand and warmer than your fear. Earth carries winter like a story it is almost done telling. Back in the house, the pot simmers something that tastes like a bridge between seasons. The last onions, a promise of nettles, a pinch of salt that pretends to be the sea. The steam is cleaner somehow, the kind that does less pleading and more inviting. The old man eats with the appetite of someone who has forgiven his lungs for their winter tricks. He declares the broth nearly green and then laughs at himself for being a poet against his will. Clothes travel to the line outside and learn wind again. Smoke resigns its laundry duties to Sunday. You shake the blankets in a ceremony that feels like relief made visible. Lice campaign less confidently. The comb still sings, but its song is shorter. The windows open just enough to let the house change its air. The draft that once argued now negotiates. By afternoon, the path to the well is honest mud. You accept its terms. Boots become heavier and happier, each step a vote. 2 cottages down, someone mends a cartwheel. Its iron rim rings with a note that sounds like industry and church bell had a child. You carry a bundle of thatch, the good dry stuff saved against fire, and feed it to the roof in mouthfuls, tucking it with the same care you once used to tuck blankets. Above you, the sky changes colour by degrees you can feel on your scalp. The river thin all winter, like a string drawn tight, finds its width again. Children test it with sticks then, with daring. Their shrieks are the kind that contain no alarm. They are bravado learning pitch. A dog splashes and becomes proof that joy is waterproof. Across the bank, a field still holds snow in its shade. It does not mind, not anymore. It will trade it for grass soon enough. You inventory the house with spring eyes. The herbs hanging from the rafters are fewer. You thank them without saying so. The coal pile is low. This is not bad news. It is arithmetic, solving to 0 as designed. The chest is lighter. It holds enough. Enough is a feast after winter. The bed smells more like straw and less like smoke. The door opens easier wood, learning humility when damp. The bench has one more notch, the kind no one carved times pocket knife at work. Evening comes later now, but it comes. The fire keeps its job description just with friendlier hours. You bank it because habit is good. You do not fear it as you did in January, because habit has company now air that does not bite. The room's colour changes at dusk. Smoke is a grey ribbon instead of a net. The oiled linen glows with a softer square, and frost does not write its alphabet there anymore. The hen dreams on her rail. The cow chews a patient argument with cud and wins. You sit with the others and eat the new soup out of old bowls. Conversation remembers its plurals. Plans are said out loud, where to set the bean poles, when to borrow the plough ox, who will help the widow set her fence, what day the priest will bless the seed. No one speaks the word luck. They speak weather saint days, the farm's history of forgiving or not. The child discovers dirt under his nails and is congratulated. It is the same as ink on a scribe's fingers here. When darkness finally collects itself, it is thinner. The first sleep comes later, and weighs less. Between sleeps when you tend the coals, the air at the door is almost kind. You crack it open, and the night smells of water moving and wood softening, and something sweet you cannot yet name because it is a future plant signing its first letter. Stars look closer, as if they too have stepped toward the season. You keep the ember, and it keeps you. But the partnership is fairer now. Dreams change their costume. They keep the house and the straw and the bench, but add colours that winter forbids: the bright rash of poppies in a barley throat, the wild green of hedges uncombed, the deep brown of bread that remembers rain. You dream of hands in soil of the cowing grass, up to her calm knees of the child, running until the horizon learns his name. Even fear shows up, wearing a smaller hat. Morning comes like a friend who learnt to knock. The child wakes hungry in a way that is easy to feed. The old man steps into the day without rehearsing. The mother smiles, and it lands differently. It lands like a seed instead of a leaf. You lift the door latch, and the world answers with birds that were not there yesterday. They speak fluent spring. You will manage with nouns for a while: rake seed, fence path, well sun hand. You take one last look at the hearth before you go out. Red holds under ash like a promise signed, but not yet read aloud. The fire will be here when you return with mud up to your ankles, and a tiredness that is not the same as winter's. The house will smell of wet wool and green water, and the honest fatigue of tools. You step outside and close the door, and it does not argue. This is how Thaw is kept, not by celebrating what ends, but by attending to what begins. You do not declare victory, you declare tasks. You do not retire the patience winter taught. You retune it to a quicker key. The world is not easier, it is just more willing. You meet it the only way you have ever met anything that mattered together, with hands in weather under a sky that is learning again how to be blue. Behind you the ember breathes. Before you the field lifts its pale face. Between them you carry a basket, a hope, a name, and the good tired laugh that belongs exclusively to those who spent a season enduring and found at the edge of it the oldest verb available to people like you: begin. You've just walked through another forgotten corner of the past, not the world of kings or saints, but the quieter country where most of humanity has always lived. The small rooms, the muddy fields, the faith that bends but doesn't break. These are the places where history truly breathes. Here at Poor Historian, we don't chase the noise of glory. We listen for the whispers, the sound of a wooden spoon scraping the last meal from a pot. The hush before a bell tolls the breath of someone still alive after everyone richer has gone. The poor never wrote their stories, so we try to lend them a voice slow and steady, the way truth prefers to travel. If you've stayed this long, perhaps something in those voices found you. Maybe you recognized a little of yourself in their endurance, the quiet act of getting up again, of doing the work that no one will ever sing about. That's what this channel exists for, to remind us that survival is not small, that dignity can live in the dirt, and that memory is the gentlest kind of rebellion. Take a moment before you go. Let the sound of their world fade but not vanish. Picture the candlelight softening the corners of a cottage, or the hush that follows when the last tool is put away. Those lives are long gone, but their echoes are patient. They wait for anyone willing to listen without hurry. If you want to keep walking these narrow paths of the past, the ones that smell of smoke, sweat, and stories, you can help them stay lit. Subscribe to Poor Historian and let history find you when the world gets too loud. Leave a comment if a scene or a sentence stayed with you. That's how we keep these voices alive. And if this journey brought you a little calm, a little wonder, or just a better kind of silence, share it. Someone else might need that stillness too. There are more lives waiting here. Peasants, healers, builders, soldiers, mothers, ordinary souls who made the Middle Ages anything but dull. Their stories don't demand attention, they earn it. Each one is another piece of the great mosaic of how we got here, not through brilliance or conquest, but through persistence. So as you close your eyes or drift into sleep, remember this history isn't only what was written, it's what was endured. And somewhere, in the dust between centuries, the poor are still telling their stories, softly, stubbornly, gratefully, to anyone willing to listen. Thanks for listening, for remembering, and for keeping company with the forgotten. We'll meet again in the next quiet story.